fear of God. I mean, full and memory verses and all that. And I remember that there was this verse we learned when we were children. I don't really remember it anymore. I'm not a very good rememberer. I'm better at analyzing rather than remembering. But thank God that the Bible is there and it remains. So I went to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. And what it says is, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Very, very short passage, but heavily loaded. First, it says what it's going to say next. It started by saying what I'm saying next is the conclusion of the whole matter. The conclusion of the whole matter. Then he says it, fear God and keep his commandments. And goes back to say, this is the whole duty of man. For many years, I was in the broadcast industry, and people in the news department have this slogan. You know, when you listen to the news, they start by saying, tonight, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Then they start reading the news. And when they finish, then they say, they give you a kind of summary. In the newsroom, the slogan is, tell them you will tell them, and tell them that you told them. So you start by saying, tonight in the news, you are going to da-da-da-da-da-da. Then they actually read the news, and then they say, well, we told you at this, we told you this, we told you this. So that's the newsroom slogan of tell them that you are going to tell them, and tell them that you told them. And I suspect that maxim must have been learned from this Bible verse, which starts by saying, the conclusion of the whole matter. It gets you prepared. It's going to tell you the conclusion of the whole matter. And says it. Fear God and keep his commandments. And then the rider. This is the whole duty of man. That's the totality of man's existence on earth is to fear God. We are here mainly or essentially to fear God. Then there must be a lot in this thing called fear, the fear of God. In a pidgin, you say, this fear God thing is like the go-come. The totality of the by the time you go and come, this is what you will end up with. So definitely there must be something in fear God. If it is the totality, if it embodies the totality of our existence, it's the conclusion. When you look at the conclusion of the whole thing, it is what you find. So there must be something about it. And this morning, I just want to try to help us to look at this thing called fear, particularly the fear of God, so that we in our walk with God will be able to understand the demand to fear God in context and be able to actually implement the fear of God. One interesting thing is that the Bible is full of passages that talk about fearing God. So definitely there's something about this fear of God. The 2 Corinthians, for example, 2 Corinthians 7:1 says, since we have these promises, beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from every defilement of body and spirit, bringing holiness to completion in the fear of God. That's the completion of holiness is the fear of God. The completion of cleansing ourselves from every defilement of body and spirit is the fear of God. And that is very interesting. It goes on to really accentuate this thing about the fear of God. Revelations 14:7 says, "And he said with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water." Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. Like I said, the Bible is filled with passages, verses that talk about the fear of God. And I mean, lots and lots and lots of them. But let me just read one more. Proverbs 9:10. This is the popular one. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the Holy One is, knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." You have it all over the Bible. In Proverbs, in Job, in Ecclesiastes. You have this. It keeps bringing us back bringing back to remembrance the need to fear God. And having now found out, or rediscovered, that this is the core of our duty as humans, to fear God, then there must be a lot in it. But if you read the Bible and you come across all these passages that say fear God, fear God, fear God, you will be shocked when you then meet fear not. And that one fills the Bible also. Fear not. Rather curious, isn't it? If you don't see fear not, sometimes you will see be not afraid, or some other rendition of that statement. Usually, probably said by some man of God to God's people, but even sometimes said by God to people. Our central, our core, our main duty is to fear God. And you then encounter that God, and what do you hear? Fear not. You find that there are very, very many passages in the Bible. Usually when man encounters God, usually in unexpected circumstances, the reassuring words you hear is, fear not. Fear not. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 20, Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin." If there is anything by the name of contradiction in logic, this is one of them. Listen again. Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, for God has come." I thought we were supposed to fear God, and God has come. And he now says, "Do not be afraid." But not just because God has come. He said, because God has come in order to test you. God has come to test you, and yet you should not be afraid. And in order that the fear of him may remain with you. Do not be afraid, so that you can continue to fear God. I didn't write it. I read it in the Bible. I learned a bit of logic. This is the kind of thing we refer to as contradiction in logic. But let's go on. In Isaiah chapter 41, verse 10, it says, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee." Now, again, this is the God we should fear. He is now with us. We are there. We are together. And he says, because I am here, don't fear. So there's something going on. There's something going on. We need to unearth this thing that is going on. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. He even goes further and starts giving us a better idea of what is going on. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. In Isaiah 14:13, for I, the Lord your God, hold your right hand. It is I who say to you, fear not. I am the one who helps you. In Luke chapter 2, verse 10, it says, and the angel said unto them, fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. Now, God's messenger has come, the God we are supposed to fear. And what he says is, fear not, because I have brought you good news. When the angels appeared, of course, people will fear, because it's not a usual occurrence that you encounter an angel, whether with wings or whatever. But when you really encounter an angel, you are disturbed. So it was necessary for God to reassure these shepherds that they should fear not. In Revelation chapter 17, chapter 1, verse 17, it says, then I saw him. I fell at his feet as though dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, fear not. I am the first and the last. So we see this seeming contradiction over and over and over again in the Bible. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And when you meet the Lord, he says, fear not. So definitely there is something really, really interesting in these things. Psalm 34, verse 4. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and delivered me from all my fears. I sought the Lord, and he heard me. God intervened in my situation, and what was the result of this intervention? I was delivered of all my fears. All fears. Even the fear of God. It says all. So, you see, I'm beginning to modify the way I'm talking. I'm saying this seeming contradiction. So if you are getting exasperated, keep your peace. Yeah, there's resolution. You know, I get involved in this thing they call Nollywood sometimes. And even sometimes in music, when you compose, you do what they say, you take you to a cliffhanger and you resolve. And when the music resolves, you feel, so we're soon going to get there. So, he delivered me from all my fears, including that fear God was delivered. So definitely, there's something about the word fear that we don't properly understand yet. Otherwise, we will not be faced with these repeated contradictions. We will find, if we look carefully into all these statements, you will find that the word fear is being used in two different ways. When it says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, it is not exactly the same concept that the word fear refers to there, that it also refers to when it says fear not. So there's a difference between these two manifestations of the word fear. There's a difference between fearing and being afraid. There's a clear difference between fearing and being afraid. So when a Niger person tells you, they fear, he's really not saying, are you not bothered? He's kind of saying, don't you know that this is the kind of place you have to tread softly? It's not so much of, is your heart not beating faster? It's, don't you think there's a need to apply some decorum here? So, there's a sense in which the word fear, even though is heavily related to being afraid, they are still different. Or even when in a pidgin you say, the thing they fear me, oh, it's not that I am perturbed. It's like I'm not really clear. I don't know how to approach this. Even the English language even makes it a little complicated. When the Englishman says, I'm afraid I won't come tomorrow, there's nothing about trepidation in that. He's just saying there's some kind of uncertainty in this thing. And we'll now see, and very soon we'll see that there's something about this thing of fear and uncertainty. So that's why the Englishman will say, I'm afraid. Some years ago, we had a project, and we were to invite a Hungarian to come to Nigeria to come and give some seminar. And one of my staff was organizing it. And the man replied, I'm afraid I will not be available at that time. And my staff came to me and said, see what you have done to ourselves, all this 419 thing. The man is afraid of Nigeria. So I had to calm him down. Well, actually, it's a manner of speech in the English language that is saying he can't really make it. He would like to make it, but he has this difficulty in making it. We looked at Exodus 20:20 earlier on. Let's look at it again. It says, do not be afraid, for God has come in order to test you, and in order that the fear of him may remain with you, so that you may not sin. This was the passage it was when we read this passage, we came to the conclusion that there's some contradiction going on. Now let's try and resolve it. In this passage, being afraid is contrasted with fear. It says, do not be afraid, for God has come to test you. And in order, that is, God has come to test you. God has come so that the fear of him may remain with you. Yet, do not be afraid. So certainly, there's a contrast between the idea of be not afraid and the fear of God. So certainly, when we are talking about the fear of God, we are not talking about trepidation. We are talking about something else. The knee-jerk idea about fear is an emotion. Fear. I'm afraid. The fear in I'm afraid. Oh, well, I'm afraid. That's English thing. The fear in be not afraid. Is an emotion. Is an emotion. It is an emotion that is expressed towards harm or towards uncertainty, towards pain, towards danger. When you are faced with harm, when you are faced with pain, when you are faced with danger, you are normally afraid as a human being. In fact, as an animal. Probably plants too are afraid. But we can't tell because they can't run. But animals, each time an animal is afraid, it runs. It's what they call fury and flight. Once you are faced with a situation in which you are afraid, you move. Fear is an emotion, quite all right. It is an unpleasant emotion. Whenever a person finds himself in a situation of ignorance, in unfamiliar circumstances, fear manifests. If as I am standing here and I'm looking at you, and you are looking at me with intent, and you are listening to me, and I feel somebody touch my back, for the average person, there will be a kind of fear that comes from uncertainty, because I was expecting that if somebody was coming behind me, I would have seen in the way you are looking that something is going on. And if I was totally oblivious until something touches me from behind, most people will not say, who is that? It will be. And that is that unpleasant emotion that comes with uncertainty, that comes with ignorance. It manifests in trepidation, in anxiety, in unease, nervousness, and misapprehension. These are the characteristics of fear. When you express fear, you are in trepidation. Sometimes you are even physically not shaken, but shaking. You will be physically shaken. I was once in a telephone booth in London one day. I was trying to phone, so I was lost. And I was trying to phone the people I was supposed to visit. And I think some white supremacists, about 5 white supremacists, young men, they had swastika and all that. I didn't see them. I just heard 2 loud bangs on the telephone booth. And when I looked out, I saw these 5 hefty men with all sorts of tattoos all over their body. And I wanted to make bold and say, "What do you want?" And the word did not come. My voice ceased in fear. And they laughed and moved on. I just took my bag and baggage, went into the next bus, went home, and phoned them that I got so near, but I was too far. That is the kind of experience you have when you get into a situation in which you are uncertain, circumstances in which you are uncertain about what is going to happen next. It is all based, listen to this, on ignorance. Fear is always based on ignorance, the proverbial fear of the unknown. As human beings, we like to be in control of our circumstances. It is one of our survival instincts. When you know your environment, when you know what's going on, when you make a prediction that this is what's going to happen next, and it happens. You do that again, it happens. You do that again, it happens. You relax, and you let off your guard. But when you are in a place, you sit down in a crowd, everybody is speaking Russian, and you don't even know what they are talking about. No one is looking at you in particular, and everyone that says something, you are guessing, is he saying, "Let us kill him"? That is the kind of situation in which you find yourself in fear, because there is ignorance. Fear is a result of not knowing. Fear is a result of inability to know what next. It is an expression of the fact that you are not self. It is a discomfort, it's a realization of discomfort due to the inability to deal with the situation in which you find yourself. There is an unknown. And as long I was afraid because I didn't know what they were going to do next. They could have drawn out daggers, they could bring a baseball bat, they could bring a golf club, and they could have done anything. And I was so afraid. Who speak for a living could not talk.